The Santiago Bernabeu was electric with anticipation as 80,000 fans filled the iconic stadium for Real Madrid's crucial Champions League semifinal. The atmosphere was intoxicating, with chants echoing off the stadium walls and banners waving in a sea of white jerseys that created a visual spectacle of unity and passion. But in section 114, row 18, something was happening that had nothing to do with football and everything to do with the ugliest aspects of human prejudice. Isha Mahmoud, a 22-year-old engineering student from Morocco, had saved for months to buy a ticket to see her hero Cristiano Ronaldo play in person. She had been a devoted Real Madrid fan since childhood, learning Spanish by watching matches and dreaming of someday attending a game at the legendary stadium. When she finally earned enough money from her part-time job tutoring mathematics, she bought the best seat she could afford and wore her lucky hijab, beautifully embroidered with small white flowers that her grandmother had stitched by hand. Aisha had arrived at the stadium early, excited to soak in the atmosphere and take photos to send to her family back in Casablanca. She had her Real Madrid scarf draped over her shoulders, carried a small sign with Ronaldo's name written in Arabic and Spanish, and radiated the joy of someone whose dream was finally coming true. But her happiness was about to be shattered by the hatred of strangers who saw her hijab and traditional dress as symbols of everything they feared and despised. The trouble began during the pre-match warm-ups when a group of 6 men in their 30s, who had clearly been drinking heavily before the game, noticed Aisha sitting 2 rows in front of them. Their comments started quietly, muttered remarks about Muslims and immigrants that they thought she couldn't hear or wouldn't understand. But as their alcohol consumption continued and their inhibitions decreased, their harassment became more vocal and more vicious. "Look at that terrorist," one of them said loudly enough for surrounding fans to hear. "What's she doing at a Spanish football match? She should go back to whatever desert she crawled out of." Aisha tried to ignore the comments, focusing on the players warming up on the field and hoping that the men would lose interest and leave her alone. She had experienced prejudice before, had dealt with suspicious looks and ignorant comments, but she had never been confronted with such public and aggressive hatred. The intensity of the stadium environment seemed to embolden the men, making them feel anonymous and untouchable despite being surrounded by thousands of other fans. "Hey, terrorist," another voice called out, this time directed specifically at Aisha. "Why don't you go watch some camel racing instead? This is a Christian country for Christian people." Aisha turned around, her eyes bright with unshed tears but her voice steady. "I'm Spanish," she said quietly. "I was born in Córdoba. I study at Universidad Politécnica, and I've been a Real Madrid fan my entire life. I have every right to be here." Her response only seemed to inflame the situation. The men interpreted her courage in speaking up as defiance that needed to be crushed, and their harassment escalated to a level that began to disturb other fans in their section. "Spanish?" one of them laughed mockingly. "You're not Spanish, you're an invader. Your people conquered us once, but we kicked you out and we'll do it again. Take that rag off your head and show some respect for our country." Other fans in the vicinity were becoming uncomfortable with the confrontation, but the stadium's size and noise level made it easy for most people to avoid getting involved. A few people near Aisha looked sympathetic but uncertain about how to intervene, while others simply moved their attention back to the field, preferring to ignore a situation that didn't directly affect them. The harassment was escalating when the players took the field for the official start of the match. As Ronaldo emerged from the tunnel and began his final preparations, Aisha stood with the rest of the crowd, applauding and chanting his name with the passion of someone whose admiration had never wavered despite the ugliness she was experiencing. But the men behind her weren't finished with their campaign of intimidation. As the match began and the stadium noise reached its peak, one of them threw a plastic cup that hit Aisha in the back of the head, soaking her hijab with beer and causing her to stumble forward. "That's what you get for bringing your terrorism to our stadium," he shouted, emboldened by the crowd's noise and his assumption that his actions would go unnoticed in the chaos of the match. But someone had noticed. Ronaldo, who was positioned near the sideline for a throw-in, had seen the confrontation developing in the stands. His attention had been drawn to section 114 by the obvious distress of the young woman in the hijab and the aggressive behavior of the men behind her. When he saw the cup thrown at Aisha's head, his expression changed from concentration on the game to cold fury at what was happening to one of his fans. During the next break in play, instead of jogging back to his position, Ronaldo walked directly towards section 114. The stadium began to quiet as fans realized that their star player was approaching the stands with obvious purpose. Security personnel looked confused, uncertain whether to follow him or to give him space to interact with fans as he sometimes did during matches. As Ronaldo reached the barrier separating the field from the stands, he pointed directly at the group of men who had been harassing Aisha. "You," he called out, his voice carrying clearly in the suddenly quiet section. "Yes, you 6 men in row 20. You think you're tough, throwing things at a young woman who's done nothing but support our team? You think that makes you strong?" The men who had been so aggressive moments before suddenly found themselves the center of attention from 80,000 fans and the player they had come to see. Their bravado evaporated as they realized they were no longer anonymous harassers, but the focus of stadium-wide scrutiny. "That young woman," Ronaldo continued, his voice now loud enough to carry throughout the nearby sections, "is a Real Madrid fan, just like you claim to be. She's supporting our team, she's cheering for our success, she's everything a fan should be. And you're attacking her because of her religion, because of how she dresses, because you're too ignorant to understand that being Spanish has nothing to do with what you wear on your head." The stadium had fallen almost completely silent, with fans straining to hear what was happening and television cameras focusing on the unprecedented scene of a player confronting fans during a match. Ronaldo's teammates had gathered near the sideline, understanding that something significant was occurring, but giving him space to handle the situation as he saw fit. "Isha," Ronaldo called out, somehow knowing her name or having heard it from nearby fans who had been trying to support her. "Come down here, come to the barrier." Isha, who had been crying quietly since the cup was thrown at her, looked shocked that Ronaldo was addressing her directly. Other fans encouraged her to move forward, creating a path for her to reach the field-level barrier where Ronaldo was waiting. When she arrived, visibly shaken but trying to maintain her composure, Ronaldo spoke to her in Spanish loud enough for the surrounding fans to hear. "I want you to know that you belong here," he said firmly. "You belong in this stadium, you belong in this country, and you belong in this Real Madrid family. Anyone who tells you otherwise doesn't understand what it means to be Spanish or what it means to be a Real Madrid fan." He then did something that created one of the most iconic moments in football history. Ronaldo removed his captain's armband and handed it to Aisha through the barrier. "Hold this for me," he said, captain to captain, "because anyone who faces hatred with dignity, the way you just did, is showing more leadership than most people ever will." The stadium erupted in applause that seemed to shake the building's foundations. Fans throughout the arena were on their feet, cheering not for a goal or a spectacular play, but for a moment of human decency that transcended sports. The 6 men who had been harassing Aisha were now surrounded by angry fans who were making it clear that their behavior was unacceptable, while security personnel moved in to escort them from the stadium. But Ronaldo wasn't finished. As the applause continued, he turned back to address the stadium through the television microphones that had focused on him. "To everyone watching tonight, here and around the world, I want you to see what Real Madrid really stands for. We don't care about your religion, your nationality, your race, or how you dress. We care about your passion for football, your support for our team, and your respect for other human beings." He gestured toward Aisha, who was still holding his captain's armband with tears streaming down her face. "This is what a Real Madrid fan looks like. This is what a Spanish citizen looks like. This is what courage looks like. And anyone who doesn't understand that doesn't deserve to wear our colors or call themselves our supporters." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Social media exploded with videos of Ronaldo's intervention, with the hashtag #AishaIsOurCaptain trending worldwide within hours. News outlets around the globe picked up the story, not as a sports item, but as a significant moment in the fight against racism and religious prejudice. But perhaps most importantly, the incident sparked conversations in communities around the world about inclusion, respect, and the responsibility of fans to create welcoming environments for all supporters. In the days that followed, Aisha became an international symbol of dignity in the face of hatred. She received thousands of messages of support from Real Madrid fans around the world, along with invitations to attend future matches as an honored guest. The university where she studied organized events celebrating diversity and inclusion, using her experience as a starting point for broader discussions about combating prejudice in academic and sporting environments. Ronaldo continued to maintain contact with Aisha, checking on her well-being and ensuring that she felt supported by the Real Madrid community. When she graduated with her engineering degree 2 years later, he attended her graduation ceremony, presenting her with a personalized Real Madrid jersey that read, "Captain Aisha" on the back. The 6 men who had harassed her were banned from the stadium for life and faced legal consequences for their actions. But more importantly, their behavior had been so publicly condemned that it served as a deterrent to others who might have been tempted to engage in similar harassment. Real Madrid implemented new policies for addressing discrimination in the stadium, trained staff to recognize and respond to harassment, and created systems for fans to report prejudiced behavior safely and effectively. But the lasting impact of that night went far beyond policy changes or individual consequences. The image of Aisha holding Ronaldo's captain's armband became a symbol of resilience and inclusion that inspired people around the world. Schools used the story to teach lessons about standing up to bullying and discrimination. Religious and community leaders referenced the incident in discussions about building bridges between different communities. And millions of people who watched the video were reminded that the most important victories in life often happen not on playing fields, but in moments when ordinary people choose courage over comfort and inclusion over exclusion. Years later, when Aisha had become a successful engineer and was working on projects to improve infrastructure in underserved communities, she would often speak about that night at the Santiago Bernabeu as a turning point in her understanding of how individual actions could create waves of positive change. And Ronaldo, whenever asked about the most meaningful moments of his career, would always mention the night he gave his captain's armband to a young woman who showed him what true leadership looked like in the face of hatred and ignorance.